hear and see us. Our topic today is shoe sustainability, and our speakers are Nicolene von Enter and Andy Polk. Before we start, let me explain how you can talk us during the webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can ask your question at the end of the presentations, or just write them in the chat section in the Zoom. You can also find a webinar recording, Shoedex Events YouTube channel, which will be active for a long time after the webinar and after the shoe fair. Now we can begin our first speakers, Nicolene von Enter.
Yes.
I would like to give some information about Nicolene, small CV. She is founder and creative director of the Footwearist. She has consulted with leading footwear brands around the world for more than 25 years, such as Timberland, Vans, Birkenstock, Cat, Diesel, as well as machine manufacturers or material suppliers. She is also a guest lecturer at various universities. She is known her broad future vision, connecting seemingly unrelated things to create original and effective solutions, both for startups and established companies. Over the years, she has become an expert in applying new digital and biological technologies to footwear. Currently, she is also focusing on creating new biotech solutions for footwear. Am I right?
Yes, you are.
Today, she will give an information about how to optimize mass manufacturing of footwear for circularity. Yes, stage is yours, Nicolene.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Did we not have to introduce Andy first, or do you want to introduce Andy after?
I will introduce Andy after your presentation.
Perfect. Okay, so indeed, because I will first do a presentation, I think it's going to be about 30 minutes on how we can optimize mass manufacturing. With the examples that I selected, I was also looking specifically also at Turkish manufacturing, things that are happening there in the region. So that is very applicable for all the participants. And then after this, we will have an open discussion. I know Andy also has a lot to say on this subject. And of course, then we're also open for questions of the audience. Let me share my screen. Here we go. Yes. Is that visible?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we can do the introduction really quick. So Nicolene van Enter, most people call me Nico, way easier to pronounce. Indeed, we work for companies across the supply chain. So from machine builders, material suppliers, brands, retailers and orthopedic footwear companies, and also a lot of technology suppliers. So people that make artificial intelligence, design software, data management systems. And our goal is basically, our job is what you see in the background, this grid behind all the little balls. We connect everybody together in what we call meaningful innovation projects. We work for large industry. We want to do projects that have a lot of impact. So it's not about single pairs, it's about large quantities. And how can we optimize mainly our development and our manufacturing by combining all kinds of new technologies, new materials, software, and how can we combine that into things that really work and are applicable, whether we talk about very large established companies or small startups. We do that through consulting. We organize conferences, many of them also with FDRA, with Andy, and we do a lot of training also together with FDRA. We have a fantastic program called Flow that is about digital transformation. Since a few years, we have our Footwearology Academy. We were very happy to start our online academy before COVID. So when COVID started, we could grow very quickly. So people who go there, they can find our offer on online training. This is all for footwear professionals. So this is not for students. Our students in our courses range from CEO level people down to junior designers and anything in between, whether people work in design, product development, corporate social responsibility management, innovation. All those people can take our courses. We also have manufacturers, we have material suppliers. Anyone who is basically a footwear professional that wants to update and upgrade their knowledge can join our courses. So we have one that's very relevant, which is still going on now. People can actually still join and catch up. This is our circular footwear course, which is meant for people that are defining business and design strategy. So this is not actual shoe design. This is really for management level people. And that's also part of the presentation today, talking about how to create your roadmap towards becoming circular. This is our new office where I am now inside. We are actually currently working on some 3D printing that you might be seeing. Where we are actually, as soon as COVID started, normally we are a nomadic institute, we travel. We actually set foot here in the Netherlands where I'm from. And right here we test not just 3D printing, but all kinds of new footwear applications for new types of technologies, software and machinery. But let's get down to business. So let's talk about mass manufacturing. How do we optimize it in the future so that we can become more sustainable fast? Because we need to take action very fast. But obviously, we're also talking about quantities that we can make. First thing I want to make clear is that circularity is much more than saying, oh, a material is recycled. Right now in the fashion industry, people talk a lot about, oh, sustainability is an old-fashioned word. We now call it circular. Essentially, all these things mean something different. Circularity in my book is an ambition. I personally don't know any footwear company that really is fully circular. Fully circular for us means that we create a system that is fully in balance with nature. There's no waste, no pollution, no excess material, no overconsumption, and no inequality. And I think we can all agree that we are far from that. We have a lot to improve there. So instead of just thinking, oh, circular means that I have a material and I recycle it into something else, and that is the cycle, we are talking about a perpetual cycle where things can be regenerated over and over again. That's our future ambition. That's what we talk about in our courses. We give advice on how to get there step by step, gradually, but it's not something that we can achieve tomorrow. However, there's a lot of things that we can do and should do. This is a circular system that we use for our training that we developed. The top half of the circle talks about design systems for the start of the cycle. So these are systems that are about how we create our products, the start of life. The bottom of the circle is waste management systems for the end of the cycle. In short, we have some solutions for the top, but very few, if any, for the bottom at this moment in footwear. So when we work together with companies, we start with design systems for minimal waste and resources. So how can we be much more frugal and smart with what we do now and basically bring down our waste, prevent waste, bring down cost. This is also something that we'll be talking about today because it's very effective for companies, not just on becoming much more sustainable and lowering your footprint, but also becoming, also saving a lot of cost. Usually people are thinking, oh, we need to go for materials that grow on trees and la, la, la. And this is so much more expensive and there goes our margin and so we can't do that. And especially not now that we have a COVID situation. Actually, I think this is the ideal time to start with that because you want to be more frugal because we have to operate smarter also because of COVID. And in doing that, we become much more sustainable as well. Then we talk about designing for longevity and for recycling and biodegradation. The final thing that we will talk about in our training, not so much today, is designing systems for services and experiences. So what if you do not just sell a physical product, but also digital products added to that? And then in our courses, we also work on systems for disassembly, repair or enhancement. I would always rather call it enhancement. And of course, the waste management systems for recycle and biodegradation. What I'm going to do today is to focus on the first one and show you which things you can do right now and which things you can also do to prepare for all of the other aspects. So first thing that you want to do is to know, and I mean really know, what you have already. A lot of companies think that they know what they have, but they really don't. So this, I don't know if you saw it yesterday, was a very interesting webinar with ICOL. It's a Russian company that are specialized in cutting leather, but in the most high-tech way possible. So what they do when they are at the tannery already, they scan all the hides. They make a digital twin of every hide. And then when a customer comes in with a project, they already know from those digital twins which of their hides would be most suitable for that particular project to absolutely minimize waste, knowing what the patterns are, knowing how they can automatically nest them on the leather so that they can go around the blemishes. So they know from the customer what is your price level, what is the quality level that you desire, and can already select from their digital database the right skins. So all the skins are coded, they can, with QR codes, so they can take the skins that they need for that particular assignment, optimize the cutting in a way that we have not been able to do before. So you can even simulate the production before you actually start on it to see what are my best results. And also you literally know what you have. All your material is scanned, not after the fact, but ahead of time. And I think this is one of the most innovative examples that I know of this. But this doesn't just work for leather. You can do that for many other materials as well. You also want to know what you have after production so that you can reuse it. A lot of times when I'm in Asia, for instance, people will do a production run. Whatever is left after the production run, they don't know. It's still left in the storage room of the manufacturer. And for each order, that might not be a huge quantity because, of course, you try to minimize your excess material. But for all of your production runs combined, that is still a lot of material that is often left. So instead of saying, oh, we are going to work with this new material supplier and this hip designer to create a limited edition for our brand, you could do like what New Balance did here and say, oh, look at what we still have left over from previous production runs in terms of material, and do our limited editions with that. Use what you have. The amount of material that we already have is absolutely insane. Walking to the big material markets in Asia, where you have an entire quarter of the city of Guangzhou that is filled with material, which is essentially all excess stock. So we need to know much better what we have. I'm always surprised how companies have fantastic PLM systems, but don't register what is left. So, and that's again, money. It's what you paid for already as a company. You paid for that material if you have something produced. Then think about how automation can help us recycle. Normally you would think, yes, but what if I'm left with all kinds of little pieces of material or cutting waste of material? Normally to say, oh, if we need to stitch that together, that's going to be way too expensive. But now we have systems like this, which is fully automated stitching. At this moment, we still need those templates to put the patterns in. But pretty soon we'll have optical recognition, especially if we're talking about pieces of different color, that the machines can recognize and automatically stitch together. This is opening up for us all kinds of new ways to be able to make things. So I always go to machine shows. I love going to machine shows, but I look at the machinery with the eyes of somebody who designs products. I'm not a designer, I'm an engineer, but I can think creatively about how to apply the technology. If you make a product and you know that this is possible, how can it help you to create something that could be much more sustainable? And this is not with manpower, so this could make things possible that we would not do before because the labor would be too expensive. Then rethink the way we make stuff. Combine different types of technologies, old and new. I really loved this one. I saw this last year in Guangzhou. People might recognize this. This is a knitted upper but made for string lasting. And string lasting is actually a very simple method of lasting, which was developed to be cheap and simple. Instead of having a big lasting machine, you have a very simple machine. You can pretty much do it by hand. You tighten those laces, you put this is how you put the upper around the last. And then of course, combining this with knitting, you create a zero waste upper because it's knitted in this shape. The wire goes in, you last this on a last, and there's a direct injection system for the sole. So this is also minimal material usage and no glue and cheap. So this is win, 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 win. So for people to work with. Same thing if we look at so-called fully fashioned uppers in polyesters, in synthetic leathers. What we want to achieve is, instead of having big rolls where you cut the shapes from, what if I, for instance, spray a layer of glue in this shape, flock it, and then pour the PU over it. So I make the upper already in PU in this shape. Even the manufacturers that are making, more traditional materials have options of rethinking how they can make their material without any waste. So just like we have transitioned from pieces of leather that need to be stitched together to knitted uppers fully fashioned, the industry that does make sheet material can also rethink how they make their stuff without any waste. Then think about minimal constructions that are for local manufacturing. I think what is very encouraging to know also for the people from the Turkish region, throughout Europe, I have been getting, since COVID started, more and more requests from people that want to reshore their manufacturing, who want to bring it back from Asia, from Brazil, or from other countries. This is an example from the Yeezy factory. As you might know, Kanye West has set out to produce most, if not all, of his footwear in the United States. And what they did well is, instead of thinking, oh, let me look at what we make in China now and then transport that factory to America, think about what we can and cannot do in America and design products accordingly. So they were like, we don't have people in America anymore that can do stitching or that are really good shoemakers. We don't have enough people for that. And if we do have them, they're too expensive. So how can we make constructions that have minimal human labor? So they bought Desma machines, started molding. These molds were 3D printed. They started developing these shoes with 3D printers. The first samples of it were also 3D printed. But then they turned it into molds, and now this is what they're molding, the Yeezy Foam Runner. And this is what we would normally consider to be cheap footwear, because here you already have, this is from it's in Dutch, but it's actually from a Chinese website, Wish, where they sell a copy of the thing already for 10 euros. The original Yeezy Foam Runner was $90. But now if you go on Farfetch, I don't know if you can read it here, they sell the original one for 1,300 euros, because you can see how this is price elasticity at its best, because you can see how this, we all know in the business that this is not an expensive shoe to make. Okay, it's bloom foam, so it is a more green material, so that is more expensive than a regular EVA. But still, this is not something that is hugely expensive. Once you have that mold and you make quantities, the quantity goes down for each shoe. But still, in people's perception, since this is Yeezy, they are willing to pay serious amounts for this. So I always, when I work with customers on reshoring manufacturing, it's not just about thinking, oh, what do you make now and where do we find a factory that can do that same thing? You also think about how can we really think about how we can best produce locally. What does that take? Maybe we redesign some of our collection, and how can we market that in the best way as well? You could also say that shoes like this are designed for incineration. That's another thing nobody talks about. Currently, what happens to our shoes? When we throw them away in the waste, they're not being recycled. We don't have facilities for it. In Europe, in general, they end up in the oven. They're being burnt for energy return. So you could say if we make shoes like that, especially in the bloom foam, so less petrol based, so that we have less toxic fumes, you could call it design for incineration. Is it the ideal design from a sustainability perspective? No. Is it better than what we regularly do now? Yes. can we also do mass production to be custom? A lot of times we see that in color. We have a lot of services already working with custom color material. But you can also be much more creative. This shoe is a few years old already. It's from Desma, from the 2016 House Fair, where they presented this shoe as a custom molded shoe, where we normally would say, huh, custom molding, that's going to be difficult. Well, here's what they did. This is the shoe. You would come in, you would choose for your upper, outside, and the different layers of the sole, you would choose the color, and for the sock on the inside. You would save that, by the way, you would save that data on your little badge. You would go with that data to the next station, scan your foot pressure, do a 3D foot scan. And then that was used to CNC basically the part of the last that is under your heel and arch. And that part was clicked onto the last. So there was a part that was taken out of the last. This is not my best picture, but at the time we could not take pictures of it officially. I still did. So you can see here how this is clicked on the last. So you would still have a custom footbed, even though you are molding a shoe. Then people ask me, okay, Nico, but if we talk about custom, what about 3D printing? Many people who know me know that I'm a 3D printing expert. I work for both very high-end printing companies like this company and much more low-end FDM companies. I think there's two ways around it that we see now. For mass manufacturing, we see that the higher-end companies that are printing in liquid resins are aiming to push molding out of the market. I don't completely agree on how they do it because yes, they are printing midsoles, but none of them are custom. It's basically all become a race for how can we be faster and cheaper than molding. They are far from there yet. And also the material properties are not there yet. They are getting better. Are they better than molded materials? Not yet. And also people should be realistic about what certain things mean. So when we look at liquid 3D printing, we have a lot of companies that are promoting that. They say, oh, look at this. This is real time. This sole only takes like 10 minutes to print. Yeah, technically that is true. They just forget to mention that it needs to cure for 24 hours. So, you know, that it's not as simple as people think. It's not like comes out of the machine, take off the supports, glue under, done. No, I mean, you have to understand how printing works. So that's why I work a lot on other types of printing that make wearable footwear. I can actually show you quickly one. That's what we're working on today. This is from Fuse Footwear, from Philip Holthaus, a Dutch designer. This is not printed that way. This also takes 24 hours, but it's fully wearable right away. Different story. I always say, if you do 3D printing, it must add value. It must add value more than molding. This is a sole that I have in my office. I actually have it here. People, when they see it, they're like, oh, Nico, you have that Adidas carbon sole. How nice. I was like, nope, this is a Chinese copy. This was made with a molding machine. Because this is what that is. And you can see it in the picture also. This is one part on the inside that has the much bigger holes that a molding machine can make and a sleeve on the outside that is like this, and you just click them together. If you don't make your soles custom and it's just a look, a lattice look, why would you print them? It's quite expensive. Then you can better mold them. The reason why we're not doing custom, excuse me, in 3D printing at the moment has nothing to do with the machines. The machines can do it, is the logistics. So the bigger companies that are doing this, they don't have the systems to do foot scanning, to do one-on-one custom design, and to manage that process technically. But there is no other reason. Of course, the printer can do it. It's just, I don't see it happening at the moment. I'll speed up a little bit. Another thing that we need to do, of course, is to get rid of waste in our manufacturing process. Ideally, whenever I see this, these are the frames that are left once you cut out your insoles. Of course, ideally, we change the production system so that we don't have them. I'm always thinking, can we not inject the foam into that mold and then press it? There should be ways around it. But if we do have it, yes, then reuse it in your footwear. For instance, you can encapsulate it. This is what Nike does. the Air Zoom Vista Grind. I must say, I have this shoe. Now, I'm not a small girl, and it's squashed for me completely. I wore it for a week. So even though I like the idea, the outside EVA cage that this foam is in is not holding up. So what does work really well, people might know this, Blue Maca from Stuart Jenkins, very high content of recycled materials, 85% or higher. And again, what he does is take a lot of foam, chop it up, use very little binder, but you encapsulate the foam in like a cup in and out. So basically, there's a layer on the outside that is a virgin plastic that encapsulates the recycled material on the inside so that the sole doesn't break. And it's a smart system. The one thing that I would like to see there is to make the outside of natural rubber. Because one thing that we do struggle with in general in the footwear industry is plastic micro waste. So all the plastic that rubs off on the street, it's little micro waste particles that come off of that. So what if we could at least make the bottom part out of a natural rubber and then have the rest encapsulated? Just a minor idea. Then finally, last but not least, let's make sure in mass manufacturing, and we have many options for it, that we can arrange and afford recycling. The way we make shoes now make it impossible for them to be recycled. If they are recycled, they get ground up at once. There's a low-grade granulate coming out at the end, which we can use as a filler, but that's not ideal. We cannot use all the shoes in the world for pavement. You know, it's nice that we have pavement for children's playgrounds, but we cannot pave the entire world with shoes. So we see developments in monomaterial, different types of TPU combined. I personally prefer this one. You might know this is Futurecraft Loop from Adidas. I like this one by Salomon, where they start with a running shoe, then take the granulate back and turn that into the more rigid shell for a ski boot. Once you take the TPU back, it will have very different properties than when you start it. So adding that to a new shoe and only 10% of that shoe can be recycled material makes no sense. That's also what we do a lot in our courses when we talk about circularity. Circularity does not mean that you make a product, recycle it, take that back, turn it into the same product. That is not what recycling means. You design the circuit and the network of how the material is used, but it does not necessarily mean that you take it back, and especially not for making the same product. Then other options, I know Andy has seen this one before, that I know you just have your customs summit. This is also something that I saw in China that makes total sense. This is designed for disassembly. It's a sock and a separate molded cage that are simply attached through one shoelace. But the reason why this happened had zero to do with sustainability. It's interesting how certain developments in the world can, have unintended positive side effects. Because the reason why the manufacturer did this was to evade the tariffs in America. So as we all know, the tariffs went up under Trump for products coming out of China, but not for parts coming out of China. So this product was shipped in parts. So you have the sock, you have the sole, and then you could assemble it in the United States to evade tariffs. But at the same time, this way, we make a sustainable shoe and a cheap shoe. So this is how that all comes together. If you want to know more of that, again, you can follow our Circular Business Design and Strategies course. Or if you want to know more about the manufacturing technologies as such, we also have our Footwearology for the Future training. And that brings me to the end. I'll stop sharing because then we can discuss. I hope I didn't take up all the time. No, I think I'm still good.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nicolien, for impressive presentations.
Thank you.
And sustainability is very important to protect environment and to use resources efficiently.
Yeah.
And our second speaker is Andy Polk, and he is Senior Vice President at Footwear Distributors and Retailers of America. Mr. Polk earned his Bachelor's of Arts degree in Business Administration and Political Science from Gardner-Webb University. Then he earned his Master's in International Relations from the London School of Economics and Political Science. At the London School of Economics, he studied global economics foreign policy, and social shifts occurring inside states and across borders. He leads the footwear industry sustainability and innovation working groups and programs, helping brands successfully digitize their supply chains and practically reduce their environmental footprint. He also leads the association's efforts to strategically develop and launch new value-added products, services, and professional development to help the industry on key challenges. And word is yours, Andy. And
Thank you. Thank you very much.
first of all, if you want, could you define the shoe sustainability, and maybe you can add some information on her presentations?
Yeah, so I think my job is to be a platform for the industry to have collaborative dialogue and define collaborative solutions to many of these challenges. I think the issue that we see, and it doesn't matter whether you're an American company or you're a Turkish company or you're a factory in China, we have this immense ecosystem, and everybody has their roles and their assignments and their issues and there's challenges. And I think the real challenge that's come up because of COVID is when you're thinking about sustainability, you need to think about it in terms of innovation. So not just reducing your footprint. I think there's this. I think people associate sustainability with kind of people who are super afraid of climate change and all that, and what they really need to be thinking about is sustainability is part of our innovative process. Yes, it reduces waste and it's the right thing to do, but it also changes how we do business. And we have to change how we do business in this environment to survive and succeed. And so it's a holistic look at what we're doing, I think. And I think, Nico talked about it at the start. People are looking at sustainability in terms of components or materials. And that's fine for marketing. But it's not okay for how a business is going to thrive and succeed. So there's no easy definition to it. If you go to shoesustainability.com, we put up a common definition that people can adapt and use. But the first thing I always tell people at brands, if they're getting started into becoming more sustainable, is to define it for their brand. Everybody has a different product, whether you make leather shoes, whether you make running shoes, whether you make slippers or high heels. Your culture internally is different than someone else's. You may, if you're in California, you're different than a New York firm. If you're in Turkey, you're different than a Chinese firm. So what does it mean for your company to be sustainable? What does it mean for your product? So you need to define that, because what we've seen, the challenges for the industry is even within a company, people talk past each other. So one person may say the word sustainable, and they may think they're conveying something about the environment and the impacts on the environment. And someone else receives that message and they're thinking about transparency in the supply chain and treating workers with respect. So it's such a broad term that when we held our sustainability summit, we tried to focus much more on the environmental side than workers and worker safety and things like that. So I think you have to narrow down what it is so that when workers talk to each other, they're talking in the same language. I've been on a call with a large company with 20 brands in their portfolio, and I literally heard people talk past each other on the phone call, and I had to stop everyone and say, you guys are in the same company and you're not even talking to each other about this. You're talking past each other. No one's even on the same page. So it really, it's a simple thing, but you really do have to define it. And then you have to tell your workers that it's meaningful and that matters. And you have to set standards in your company and enact KPIs. So part of your job is to do, if you're a designer, you have these, you got to design these types of shoes and you got to do this, and this is your job. Part of that for your salary and for your bonuses should be tied to are you moving the dial on sustainability? Are you designing product that could be recycled or could go somewhere else? Are you thinking about these things? Same thing in manufacturing. You know, if you're ahead of sourcing, are you going into the factory and helping the factory learn how to recycle their waste? Are you looking at the processes to make sure that, you know, they're using new technologies or new machines to reduce that? They're not just leaving the lights on all night. It's such a simple thing, but just cognitively, are the factories, you know, reducing their water waste? Are they changing processes? So we talk about these things, and I think it's, you know, it's been a hot topic or a buzzword for many years, but now it's all of a sudden, I think, flipped a light in many people's heads to say, oh my gosh, we could save a lot of money. It's like, yeah, you can do good by the environment and you can save a lot of money because it's a complete change in process. So I think that's the first major thing about sustainability is defining it for your company. And it's okay if it's different than someone else. And then I would, you know, the second thing is creating a mission around it at your company, educating your workers so they actually understand what their job is around that and what they're going for. And then I guess the third thing to it too, if you're starting up, is really tackle something. What is it in your organization, your operations, that is a bottleneck, is the biggest challenge, that also ties to an environmental impact. I'm fortunate because I get to talk to a lot of companies and have honest conversations about what they're working on, their struggles, because I'm trying to figure out what the commonalities are across all the different companies. And a lot of companies struggle with chemical issues. So Keen, for example, instead of saying we're going to take out one chemical in our process for our leather and our boots and all that, we're going to look at a whole category. We're going to go really big and we're going to eliminate it. And that's why I love watching Nico's presentations, because if you're watching this and you're going, wow, like, how do we get there? We need someone to throw the line really far out to get our minds to think there, so that we can get there along the way. Because if we're not looking towards what we could be doing, we'll do this incremental changes when we need some big shifts. So for Keen, for example, so they went after chemicals. Adidas is going after plastics. Allbirds is going after carbon and carbon emissions. So what does your company want to do? What is the bottleneck? What is the challenge that you want to solve? And all these things simply are tagging it so that your workers know what they need to be working on. And they're not, I think that's the biggest challenge, is companies who are doing really well on sustainability and enacting and making positive changes for the environment and for their bottom line have targeted goals. They have an educated workforce. They communicate those well. The ones who are not, and who may be marketing sustainable product that may not actually be sustainable, are the ones who don't do any of that. And they think that they can go to a material supplier somewhere and get a brand new mushroom material, put it on their shoe, and talk about how they're becoming more sustainable. And it's a joke, to be honest with you. I mean, I've been I have to be very reserved because I work for all these companies. They all pay my salary. So I can't go too far down the road, but I'm getting more bullish around telling people it's not sustainable, because many of these products, I mean, if you look at, for example, like one of the most recycled shoes in the marketplace, where they took product and they recycled it and put it in, and it's marketed as like this super sustainable shoe, is Nike Space Hippie. And their outsole is only 15% recycled. So you're talking about something that with the most volume and most impact is always probably the outsole, midsole, etc. The uppers it's easy to get 90% recycled material for uppers. It's not that hard. If you try, you got to pay a little bit more, but you can get there. I think the midsole is like, that's the whole ballgame for a lot of true sustainability, is how we revolutionize that aspect, because it's the most water waste. It's the most waste in our landfills that doesn't degrade. You can't do much. I mean, you can grind it up and do other things with it, but in America, we're not, like Nico said, for Europe, we're not doing any of that. We're not recycling any product or to even figure it out. Either it goes to the landfill or it goes for charity for people who are poor and need the shoes. So lot of challenges, a lot of people doing very interesting things. I'm excited because when we held our sustainability summit, I was hoping for 50 attendees. I was just like, can we get 50 people to educate? We had like 250 people that signed up for this digital summit because there's such a hunger for real solutions and real ideas. And I would say the big takeaway from everybody was how to do things a little bit better, how to better define it, just like I said at the beginning, getting all those set, how to create new workflows around that, how to make sure the workers are targeting that and they're hitting all that. But really it was around this circular idea. How do we get to circularity? So Nico's presentation, I think, was great. And it's a good glimpse into what she's doing and what people can get out of it. But it is a question that we all have to ask ourselves, is how do we design how do we redo our entire processes in footwear?
Andy, did you get the idea from the summit? Because I mean, one of the things that we do in our circular course, what I just presented is actually way down at the end of it, because the major thing that we start with is the business strategy and the business format. And like you said, when you started talking, essentially what we really need to do is also change the entire business model. So we talk, for instance, about new ways of ownership, or how to get investors, but make sure in your construction of ownership that your shareholders cannot demand unlimited growth, which is essentially also what eventually is destroying the planet. Do you see companies interested in that? Because when I get them in, they are interested to hear it, but it's kind of like, oh, you know, that we're starting there, that we're not starting from the stuff that I just explained, which is very product oriented. We have a whole part that starts on the business model. Do you see any interest from your side in that?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, honestly, from a company perspective, from people that I see and talk with, it's based on leadership. It's based on the top. Is the CEO and the vice president or the president interested in this and concerned about it? Are they aware that if they're doing these things, these sustainable process reorganizations, and it actually is better for business? Are they aware of that stuff? And if they are, then they are very concerned about it. And I think it is a leadership issue in our industry. And I think the brands who are doing really well have a leader at the top. Someone like Deckers, right? Like, so Nike is completely different. Nike and Adidas have more money than God. So it's, you know, they can do things that many of us cannot.
Because the interesting thing is all those companies, and including some newcomers to the market, brands like Allbirds, who are doing great stuff on the product side, they are still all of them in a very traditional business model.
Yeah, and
based upon shareholders.
Yeah, I think to that end, I think we're seeing a shift where people can raise debt in a different way. So instead of having shareholders, so I saw it with VF, and I've been doing actually a lot of exploration into green bonds. A lot of them are in Europe, but it's a different way to raise capital in order to reduce your footprint and actually reorient all those processes. So in the same way, and if we think of financing, we think, oh, we make a product, we sell it, we get the profit of the revenue, and it goes into our coffers. If we want to grow, we've got to issue stock or a typical bond, but those all have, you know, those all have things tied to it. The green bonds are really interesting because you could raise hundreds of millions of dollars for your green project. So Nike's doing, you know, and again, Nike's completely different than a lot of people can do, but for example, they're raising green bonds, and they're making sure all their facilities have complete renewable energy in it. So they created like a solar farm in Spain off their green bonds, and that was fully funded. So it's interesting how there's opportunities. So VF's doing this. I saw Adidas just closed around for that. So you have the possibility to actually change your processes through a different way financially, and grow your business, reduce your footprint, create completely new products, and do all of that if you're willing to go down that path and get certified and do those things. And it's really interesting. The opportunities are all there. It's just, is the company willing to go and take those steps? And again, it comes down to leadership.
Any interesting startups that you see there? Because I do think that maybe new companies or completely different business models might come up now, that especially after COVID, people that want to do it a different way.
I see a lot of companies, I see a lot of startups built around sustainability at this point.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's local manufacturing. So they talk
Yeah.
about made local. Obviously, they don't have like huge volumes, but they have great stories.
Yeah.
And I think if we're honest about footwear, we're drawn to our shoes because of stories, because of, if you have a hiking pair of boots, you're attached to it emotionally. If you have a walking pair of shoes, you're always going to go back to that brand if it's a good fit.
Yep.
If you go out on the town and you wear a great pair of leather shoes, you're always going to go back to a brand that you know and love and had a good experience with. And I think that's what they're trying to build, is these experiences of saying, I bought this locally. It was made locally. I know who made it. I know the community. I want to support that.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of startups are like that. I think there's a huge opportunity around that too, because I see a lot of wholesalers going out of business in this environment, who have made great money, but have basically gone to China or elsewhere and asked for millions of pairs of shoes, didn't know where they were going to sell them, imported them into the US in a warehouse, and then try to sell them through Amazon or find other channels once they got them in. And that just does not work anymore. You actually need, and it doesn't work for the environment either. It's a terrible way to do business. So, but there are some emerging brands that are coming up that I see talking about using environmentally preferred materials and constructions and being thoughtful about the processes. It's still, I don't see the challenge for those smaller brands is they don't really have the opportunity to do these green bonds. So they've got to bootstrap up on how they get their financing. But
well, I mean, there's a lot of company models that we talk about that are run with stewardship. So that's like a for-profit, nonprofit crossover.
Yep.
I mean, there's a couple of things that you could do there for sure. And there's also, of course, the idea of how do you treat your business models in general. So we've seen On Running from Switzerland, who have now released this subscription model for the running shoe. I personally don't necessarily agree with taking that running shoe back and turning it into a running shoe, but the idea of not owning the shoe and subscribing to the shoe as such, I totally support that. And that could be a completely different way of doing business, where you don't sell the shoe, you rent it out.
I also think there's going to be, there was previously for many years, there was a string of mergers and acquisitions in the footwear industry with major companies buying brands. And I think that's going to happen again once.
Oh, there's another round coming for sure.
I think so. And I think I think what's going to happen is some of the major companies who have not had a sustainable story or haven't had an area around that are going to buy up some smaller brands that are doing that stuff. So that should be quite interesting, I think.
Yeah. Do you think it will be mainly Chinese buying?
No, I think U.S. companies will start buying. I think brands will buy, but we have started to see Chinese companies start to buy brands in Europe and the U.S.
Groups,
not based on sustainability, just based on sheer.
No, that's not so much up there
growth.
But it could change.
But in the U.S., I think that's what it is some of these companies simply can't get their act together enough. So you buy a company that has it. And I've seen a lot of that. I've seen a company who had huge problems with compliance in factories. So they bought a company to help them solve that problem, right? So it's very interesting how you can go from zero to a real story and like actual sustainability by just buying a company. So there's another way to do that. But I think I think the next big thing right now that I see companies doing are they're auditing themselves. And they're starting to produce more reports. So I see from shareholders in the US and across the world, more of a push to produce a sustainability report. Like, how are you doing with worker rights? How are you doing with environmental impacts? So it's a challenge for a lot of companies because it's very easy to, like we say, get a sustainable material at it and market it and say, this is an amazing shoe that's this way. And it's completely different when you're saying how much energy usage are you having at your facility, or how much material waste are you having, or any of these questions are tough questions. But the market's driving that. Consumers are driving that to say, I want more transparency in what you're doing. And so I think that's, people had a choice. The leaders kind of came up with that, like Nike and Deckers has a great sustainability report, and these big brands have been doing that for a while. But now I'm even seeing folks like Steve Madden just put out a report this July. So even fast fashion, like Steve Madden is putting out stuff to say, this is where our impact is. This is how we judge. Like, how do we do this better? So I think that's a huge shift, because once you start putting pen to paper, and you start showing numbers, then you got to actually do something to reduce it.
Yeah.
And I think that will really drive sustainability, because the CEO then has to sign off on that stuff.
Yeah.
And that'll push up on the leadership. So it's, but yeah, I think, just from the conversations we had at the Sustainability Summit, it's still I still think this idea is too broad. I still think it needs to be broken down a little bit more, and people need to think about it more. And there's still these infights. I see, I know, from Turkey, there's some great leather products coming out, and I just saw a huge fight between how you measure leather sustainability with the HIG, which is a measurement in the US. And so Leather Working Group and Wool and APACA. So even these standards that people have tried to prop up to measure things are now being challenged. And I think that's a huge issue. And in terms of leather sustainability, there's always this discussion around whether leather is more sustainable than other types, whether leather companies or other products should be punished because...
I would really, really love for that discussion to change, because I had another fight indeed with a couple of tanners on LinkedIn. Most people who follow me on LinkedIn see me in constant discussion with leather people. Not because I'm necessarily against leather, but I do see, there's propaganda coming from both sides. So the leather alternative and the leather side. I get stories like, when there's leather, there's no plastic. Oh, come on. So what about patent leather, metallic leather? Leathers are coated with polymers. So the polymer industry and the leather industry both need each other to collaborate together on better solutions. The story of leather is not plastic is not what reality is like. So it makes no sense to say, we need to push that onto the consumer, so they will choose leather or not. From the leather side, what I don't understand a lot of times is what is great about leather that no other material can challenge is the durability. It will last so very long. However, if you then decide to use that material on shoes that are very ephemeral and shoes that will only last a season and then you can throw them away, you can wonder, does that make sense? So I was in a webinar yesterday, great one from Timberland about regenerative leather, the lines that they're working on. That is fantastic. Those are shoes that you will use for a long time, that can be repaired, that use a leather that comes from agriculture that is regenerative, that is good for the earth. So there's so much we can do. And when you approach it that way, it's the most sustainable material that you could have, including animal welfare. So it's about looking at the whole system and about reality. So I
think you're right. I think leather producers and people who produce leather shoes need to change the conversation. I think they're getting baited into a fight that does not need to happen.
Exactly.
I would not get baited into a fight with PETA over ethical treatment of animals, as long as you're using good tanneries that have been audited and certified. Like why even get into that? I know it's people's livelihoods, and it may be generations of families doing that. So I get that, but I think the leather industry needs to stop getting baited into these fights with PETA or these, plastic, non-plastic. And I think, it behooves them to, as you say, work with what they got and improve what they got. And I think even we've seen a lot more machines now, to your point, with the data, where you can map out on the hide and say, okay, here's your hide grade on this, and then here's patterns. And I think that's where the leather industry needs to focus on, is optimization of all that, and not get baited into these discussions. Because I agree. I think we're going to have leather. So you're going to throw it away, or you're going to use it, right? It's not like plastics where you got to make a plastic for a product. You didn't need to make the plastic. So I agree with you. These conversations I don't like. I would rather just say, leather's pretty sustainable as it is because of the durability and because of but is there a little bit more that leather companies could do to optimize, to reduce the waste even of the leather product itself? And that's the story I want to hear.
Yeah. Well, I think the difficulty also within the leather industry is that there's great discrepancies between how leather is made in Europe and in different parts of the world, where you can really not compare some of the things because of the super strict regulations. There are actually a lot of projects already in Europe where the leather is fully circular, fantastic wastewater management, solid waste is being recycled, all that. They are further along there than the synthetics industry is. However, that's not everywhere. So that's, I think, another issue that the leather industry has. They cannot, in general, say that this counts for leather in general. This counts for leather in certain areas of the world, and not at all for leather in certain other areas of the world. So, and that does make it difficult. I do also protest always against the leather is a waste product of the meat industry. It's a co-product, and I've also never seen leather come out of a slaughterhouse. Rawhide comes out of a slaughterhouse, and then we decide to make leather in a certain way. So there's so much we can do there, and there's so many opportunities, especially also for the leather industry, that are not about being continually on the defense against. We've had a fantastic exhibition last year at Dutch Design Week. It was called Like Leather, and it had both leather and leather-like materials. And it was not mentioned whether something was an animal leather or no. It was just all kinds of options. And nobody was talking about, oh, this is real leather and that's mushroom and the mushroom is better. People enjoyed all the examples.
Right.
So that for me,
customers don't care. People don't know these fights are going on.
Customers like both materials. So
Right.
I was even like, if you can't beat them, join them. Why indeed not start making shoes that are animal leather and mushroom leather? Yeah. But when you talk to people about the leather industry, they're about to shoot you down because of this type of thinking. But nobody of the audience, that was also not the intention of the exhibition. Nobody was having any kind of discussion about what is better than what. They enjoyed all of those materials in their own right. And I think there's a lot we can do there.
And again, I know there's a lot of leather, other shoe companies in Turkey and around the area and the Mediterranean Aegean, but I do think the big fear for a lot of them is, okay, everything's going athletic, athleisure, but I've seen some fantastic casual leather shoes that are
companies
amazing.
Like Doc Martens going
nothing more comfortable than I mean, so there's still huge opportunities and people are still looking for that, so there shouldn't be a concern around that. I think
also in markets outside, let's not forget that Europe and America are not the only big markets. The bigger growing markets are the Middle East and Asia for domestic markets. So also to sell the product to there, you would have very different areas, and the perception of leather in both the Middle East and China is opposite almost to the discussion that we have now in Europe and America.
And I do want to also bring in the discussion around sourcing and manufacturing and where that's shifting to. And I think because of numerous things, we had a sourcing summit earlier this year where we looked at global footwear sourcing and how it was shifting and changing. We looked at, American marketplace, European, Canada, some other countries where they were importing product in and where it was coming from and shifting. And I've never seen such a churn. I haven't, I've been in the industry almost a decade, so not that long, but I've never seen such a churn for something that's so important to costing and production and even to retail. Like if the stitching isn't right, the consumer sees that and they're not going to buy it. So all that is, manufacturing is so important. Yeah. And China's been so good for manufacturing for so many years, but then all of a sudden the bottom fell out with the tariffs.
Yep.
With ethical treatment of workers in China right now is hugely concerned.
Oh yeah, the Uyghurs. Yeah.
The costs are increased. There's this just perfect storm that keeps happening there. And so people have been going to Vietnam, they're in Indonesia, people are looking in Bangladesh, they're increasing in Cambodia, they're looking to Ethiopia, they're looking in European states to find ways to create product lines. And I think that will in some ways help sustainability issues, because as you shift, hopefully you're finding factories that are automated. Because they have to be. Because if you're like, for example, in Vietnam, there's limited capacity because there's only a certain amount of people in Vietnam. In China, you've got 1 billion workers. In Vietnam, you have, 30, 40 million people, something like that. So you have to automate. And in the same way, I think, same way in Cambodia, same way, so obviously some product needs hand touching, some product you can get by with machines, but I see a lot more opportunity to change what we've been doing because we're moving and we have to find those cost reductions and increase speed. All that people don't call it sustainability, but it is. If you can reduce waste, increase speed,
for sure.
all of that's sustainable.
Yep.
And that's why I always say the innovation side and the sustainable side are one and the same right now as we look at new products and new processes.
Yep. True. I don't know if there were any questions. We've been having a nice chat here.
Hi, Nicolene. Hi, Andy. I hope you hear me okay.
Yes.
So I'm Kanzander, the chairman of the JNS Sport Association. So I would like to welcome you to our event, Shoedex. I have two questions. First of all is about the sustainability of footwear side, because this is the part of the business that we are not so aware of. Just looking at some European-based online sales companies now coming out with some sustainable products they call sustainability, and the only, let's say, sustainable part of it is the leather that has been, so to speak, bought by some tanneries that are certified by Leather Naturally Group. I mean, just figure out a Goodyear welted shoe. They have probably more than 30 different substances used inside, and you just consider one product by only the leather that has been bought from a certain tannery that has this certification. So if now the retail side of it starts to consider sustainability only from the leather part or the upper material, what will happen next? So as producers, what we should be doing for this, I mean, if we only buy the leathers from this certified tanneries, we are sustainable. I mean, I think this is only joking. There is nothing serious about it. So this is why actually in the last weeks we have been following your seminar about sustainability in footwear, because this is really a subject that hasn't been treated enough. And my second question will be about the virtual exhibitions. So we have been doing Shoedex for a second time. The first one was from the 1st to the 4th of June. It was like a trial, and now we are trying to do this better and bigger. So I would like to know a bit the opinion of your markets, what they think about such events, and how we can actually grow such events, I think, because they are more sustainable than any other physical events. Thanks.
Good questions. Nico, you want to take the first one about the greenwashing?
Sure. Well, I mean, my general response to that, to anybody that's looking at footwear sustainability, look at the holistic approach and look at the whole life cycle, because honestly, when we look at, for instance, Goodyear welted leather footwear, okay, even if you say we just bring down the footprint of some of the leather that is used in there, those shoes already have a relatively low footprint, because what nobody takes into account is the lifespan of the shoes. Goodyear welted shoes have a very long lifespan. So even though that's, for instance, now you see a lot more companies that put their carbon footprint on their shoe. I know that Allbirds and Adidas are going to do that, but that says only something about the carbon footprint start of life. Now, the Space Hippie, for instance, that you just talked about, might have a low footprint start of life. It also has a very short lifespan. And the way that that product is made, it's only made for the oven. There's no other way we could ever recycle that shoe again. That's true. I mean, I have a very different perspective on, I mean, one of the biggest issues, I think, in general, is that companies are trying to put the responsibility for sustainability on the consumer. So they are looking for simple stories to tell the consumer. Let's inform the consumer on the most sustainable option. Even though in our industry ourselves, we don't even agree on the most sustainable option. And the most sustainable option is very complicated. So technically, even though if you make Goodyear welted shoes and you want to see if you are more sustainable than your competitor, you might think, oh, they only have, slightly lower footprint because of that leather. At the same time, Goodyear welted shoes, especially if they are repairable and are being repaired, have a very low footprint because of the long lifespan, because you divide your carbon footprint by your lifespan. So divided by 2, 3, 4, 5, I mean, it gets lower, 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 lower. So that is the issue that on the one hand. So the sustainability aspect is not that simple, and people now assume that the material needs to have the lowest carbon footprint possible, and in some cases that is good, and in other cases it means that you spent a lot of energy for a shoe that lasts a few months and can then be burnt only. So, and it's just too complicated, I personally think, to have a consumer decide what that difference is at the moment.
And I'll chime in here too, because I think what's happening is retailers are requesting factories or brands to fill out forms now saying, what's the story we can tell? Does this have a certain material that's sustainable? You know, did you do something different? Like what? So there's, just like they're requesting product safety forms saying, what chemicals did you test? You know, what processes did you make sure that you paid your workforces adequately and that the minimum wage and everything's in legal order? They're going to start adding the sustainability stuff to it. And the problem is, to what you're talking about, and I think it's exactly right, they don't know what to ask. So they're asking, they're just saying, give us anything that we can talk to our consumer about. The problem is, when you do that and you don't know what to ask and you just start putting things up on a website, it harms what is really sustainable. And it harms how we educate the consumer to have the eye to say, okay, I'm in Washington, D.C. So for 4 years, my BS meter's been going off the charts of saying, that's not right. That's not right. So the consumer, it's harming the consumer's eye to be like, that story doesn't seem right. No. And this is where the greenwashing comes in, of saying, if you keep saying this stuff too much and it's not really true, then it like harms the effect of what is actually sustainable versus what's the marketing language. And so I'm actually trying to get with brands right now to come up with standards and nomenclatures and how we talk about it. I think for a factory, if you're looking at this and your partner doesn't know what to ask and they just start saying, give us anything, I think just like what brands are doing on their reports, I think a factory should do their own report. And I think you should look at your processes, and I think you should say, okay, this is how we've been doing all this stuff. What can we do better? And keep a report or a log of, you know, we reduced this water, we did this. And I would send it to all my partners and be like, this is our sustainability story for you. You can pick and choose what you want, but we're measuring this stuff. And this is what you should be telling your consumers. We reduce water waste, we reduce energy waste. We did all these different process shifts, not just the material. But if you can track, you know, how you're using different materials, or you can track that sustainability, I think you need an internal list so that, you know, if the retailers do start asking that, or you could educate the retailers or your brands much better about what really is happening in the factory as you produce it, that would make them more educated and that would help them know what to talk about. But I think, you know, from a business perspective, it's a good idea to go on the factory floor and walk it and say, okay, like, obviously, you know where your bottlenecks are and speed and quality issues and all that. Same thing, just walk the floor and think about from an environmental standpoint and say, okay, like there's a lot of water over there. Like, how could we put in a system that recycles the water right back into the factory instead of going out? Yeah. How do we make sure that the lights go off in this sector at nighttime instead of staying on? Like, what little things like that you could create a report on that would tell your partners what's happening, and it would help you find your business challenges in a different way, in a different light. I think that would be huge. And I think you should report too on, and this is the key thing now, because I've got to figure out, like, I'm working on something around shoe component, you know, because what is a sustainable shoe? Is it, you know, people talk about the upper being sustainable, but then the foam bottom is just foam. So is it actually sustainable if 90% of the upper is recycled and then the foam is a typical foam? And you can say, well, it's 90%. Well, no, you didn't count the foam. And then if you're talking about volume and weight, so if we think in US trade, everything's done by weight. So your customs classification is, how much does this weigh? How much does that weigh? That's the law. I don't know why they created it that way, but it is. So if you're weighing the shoe and the upper's knitted, that doesn't weigh anything. It's all the foam. So then it's not sustainable at all by weight, right? So these are difficult things, but that it comes down to defining it for yourself, what you want to measure, how you want to measure it, but creating like a logbook or like a guide for your own internal uses that you have on hand. Say, are we doing better? Are we doing worse? What can we tell our partners? How do we educate them on what's really sustainable at the factory level is key. And then second question is interesting because I think virtually it's 100% sustainable to do stuff like this, to find new products. And it's great for the suppliers because you get to see the data of someone who's looking. You actually get their card. It's not somebody just passing by. There could be some real business relationships formed on these platforms. I think the challenge is, and I think going forward, even if we can get in person, and I hope I get to go back to Turkey. I love Turkey. I've been to Ankara, Çanakkale, Istanbul, fantastic coffee. Love the people, love the spice markets, great food. Love to come back in person at some point when all this nonsense is over, all this terrible plague upon all of us. But there's still going to be a need to have digital assets either before or after meetings to facilitate better discussions and ideas and fulfill orders. So this is, even if your shows go back to some physical format, this will forever remain. I would just say, I think the challenge is we try to get as many people on as possible. So handbags and shoes and clothes and all that. I think the real winner would be to go leaner and more, meaning I would do more of these, but I would do segments. I would do handbags only, or I would do shoes only, or I would do clothes only. And I would make it a market week. And I would say, if you're looking for handbags, there may only be 10 people on this platform, but like, this is the 10 best people that you're going to meet, and really make it quality driven versus quantity. And I know it's hard because we're taking over Fanny now at Market Week in New York, and we're trying to figure out the same thing. But that's my idea, is how do we do segmented shoes, high heels, men's shoes, loafers, athletic fashion, and how do we do a week around that so it's just that product and not end all be all. And I think that's where the feelings have been. It's just too much.
What I am surprised about still is that I find that, and maybe it's because of the speed at which we all had to develop this because of the situation, but people are perceiving online trade shows and conferences very much like an online version of the physical one, instead of thinking, okay, what can I do online that I would never be able to do in the physical trade show? As an example, whenever I go to Linea Pelle in Milan, I'm always trying to find the more sustainable solutions or alternatives to keep up with what people are suggesting. I can never find it because the trend forums there are not geared towards that. It's more on aesthetic. So I would love to know, based upon certain criteria that I have, that I can search and say, or that I could even talk to somebody of the organizer and say, listen, this is what I need. Can you tell me from your offering, from the people that you work with, who can help me there? Who has that? Like really matchmaking, which you might not even be able to do on a physical trade show in any way. So I would like to see different solutions there. And we have the same as Andy, also with several partners, in our case, more from the technology side, trying to develop better solutions for that.
Yeah. Could you look at the chat section?
Yeah, I saw a question by Mehmet. Yeah.
From Sepiciler Feneri writes.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I fully understand the question.
Opinion about Mehmet Sepici's.
So I'm not sure whether Mehmet mentions whether he means that he can or cannot say that they are sustainable. So the one thing that as I understand it, he makes a full leather shoe, so upper, sole, and lining. That is a very durable shoe for sure. Especially if there's options to have it repaired, etc. What I don't fully understand about the question, that it says that it's fully biodegradable material. Leather is not necessarily biodegradable. That's why we keep finding Roman sandals from 2,000 years old. The reason why you tan is to not have the leather biodegrade. You can actually make biodegradable leather, but it's not so that the average leather is biodegradable. So that part of the question I did not fully understand. Is this about a specific biodegradable leather, or is he implying that leather is biodegradable in general?
Yes, Andy. Is there
Yeah, I'll leave that to Nico because I think she nailed it on that one. I just think when you're talking about sustainability from a factory level or a tannery level, I think it's so important to be technical. I think the retailers and brands are not being technical. For US law and EU law at the same time, there are laws that state that you cannot mislead consumers. And I think there's been a lot of brands running afoul of that by, and I don't want to mention any names, but I look at some of this stuff and I'm like, you're either walking the tightrope or you're completely against the law. And there's going to be enforcement coming at some point where people go back and look and say, you said that this is the most sustainable shoe in the market. Well, how did you back that up? What is this based on? Like, you can't.
I think natural leather more biodegradable according to the PVC or PU.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing is, you have the ability as a tannery or as a factory to like get very technical and say, here's our process.
Nicola thinks that, I know that some of the producers produce biodegradable PVC and PU, but
you know what the thing is with whether this is a so in general, most people, and I assume also in Turkey, don't make fully veg tan leather. They make a chrome tan or a synthetic tan. Biodegradable simply means that under natural influences, soil and microbes, a material degrades. It says nothing about what is left after that. So most people think that biodegradable and compostable are the same thing, but they are not. So it will eventually degrade, but we know if the leather is chrome tanned or synthetic, it will leave a residue of chrome or whatever else it is in the soil. Yeah. So that's what I mean. A lot of times, yes, it's a very technical story, but I also want to, distinguish sense and nonsense here, where leather in general, even if it biodegrades, you can have leather biodegrade quicker with an accelerator where you actually intend to biodegrade the leather. Ideally, since it's such a durable material, it's not the route that I would go right away. There are a lot of initiatives in the leather industry for leather recycling by essentially undoing the linking of the collagen fibers, so dissolving the leather. I don't know if you saw that last year on Linea Pallida, there was a presentation about that. Those are all very interesting developments. In essence, though, when you make leather, it's such a durable material that, in my opinion, the first step you should take is put it in a shoe or any other product that is as durable as possible. You want to have it last. I mean, if I were a leather shoe producer, like the Goodyear Welted, I would not say my carbon footprint is super minimal. I would say, but listen, my product lasts you for 10 years, 15 years, whatever. That's where my durability is. That's a claim that no PVC, whatever PU manufacturer could ever tell you. I work with a lot of sneaker collectors. I'm actually doing a project now for people who collect sneakers and they're falling apart because we know that within 20 years, everything will essentially crumble. We cannot conserve those. I work with footwear museums who don't even know how to keep those shoes. They will all crumble. We need to have them in virtual reality. They cannot last. And that is what leather shoes don't have. We have for thousands of years still have leather shoes in museums. So that's the thing. It's a very simple message, super true, and all consumers understand it. So it's,
yes. If do you have any questions for the attendees?
Yeah, I would like to ask back to Nicola because the difference between making a good product that can last very long is not really actually the target of many retailers so far, and because they want to sell more. So being more durable is not their target, and it's not also the major part of sustainability. I haven't seen anybody treating sustainability with durability so far.
No, so, unfortunately, and I'm happy that you addressed that because that is actually the biggest thing that we will do. So that is the whole thing. Are retailers doing it? No, that's one of the reasons why we need different business models, because we can keep saying it's not what people want. And that is true. So we have to make stuff that you can make quicker, but the bottom line will always be, even if we use materials with lower footprints, that is, as long as we keep thinking that we can just consume as much as we like and have things that last very short. I mean, we are increasing in numbers like crazy. I'm working in a project in Nigeria at this moment. I never realized that Nigeria will have more people than the United States in 2040. We are seeing an increase of people that are not able to buy products for a high price. We will see many, many, many more issues there. If our only solution is going to be, we're going to make more, and somehow it has to be harmless, it's not going to happen. So I do think we can
I also think younger generations are the same. I think their purchasing habits are changing. I think COVID will change a lot of purchasing habits for younger people as well, especially as, I mean, if you look at the numbers and you see polls or surveys, how many young people are so concerned about the environment, and that will be driving their decisions over price. So, like, you know, obviously our generation and older generations are completely driven by price and consumption, and it will be complete opposite.
You can do short-term fashion and then design for a shorter lifespan, but that's not where you use leather. So that's where, if I do a lot on the biotechnology side, that's where we see the developments where you can have plant-based materials that will intentionally last for a shorter time. But that's not something that the leather tanning process is very suitable for. And I think it would also be a shame to go through that whole process of, you know, raising cattle, getting the hide, tanning, et cetera, and then saying, oh, and this is going to last you for a year.
Well, I also think we don't know yet what new businesses will be created out of COVID, meaning you could create an accessory business around a pair of leather shoes. Meaning you can buy the pair of leather shoes, you could go in and have it personalized, just like a tattoo. You could go, you could wear it for a while, you get bored of it, you go get something else added to it at like a shoe tattoo parlor. So have something else ingrained in the leather. I mean, we create a business right now, Nico, where we create tattoos on these shoes, but all of a sudden you got a brand new shoe out of the same shoe.
Yeah. Philip, can I show those? Yeah. Oh, I want to show you something quickly. Can I show those? Yeah. So we're actually working on a project exactly like that.
Oh. Stole my idea. I'm filing the patent right now.
Here you go, folks. This is from a Dutch brand, Peterson Stoop, together with Philip Holthausen, who's here. This is a Nike Air Jordan leather mid-cut, worn, recycled. And this is a 3D printed sole that was made for that, to upgrade that shoe. And
right, because the bottom wore out, right?
Yeah, the bottom wore out. So they put new lining in there. So this is actually a veg tan sock liner. It was all cleaned. This is a brand that was started by a footwear designer and somebody who has a long career in footwear repair. And this is super cool. And the prices for this type of product retail are far over 500 euros. And they're selling more than enough. So you could even see the upgrade. You can see how young people would be interested. I was talking to my intern. He was like, I would be interested to send my sneakers to my favorite shoe repair person, the repair designer, to get them repaired specifically by this person and pay extra money for that. This is a whole scene that doesn't even exist. But this is the type of stuff that we need to be looking at, where you would say, I make a leather upper because that lasts for a very long time. And I have a collaboration with one or more other companies that can not just repair, no, change my shoe into something better, into something new. Repair is always about patching up. It's never as good as the new one. You're kind of like, oh yeah, okay, it's acceptable again, but it's not as nice as when I had them new. And this is like, oh wow. This is again like having them new. So this is the type of stuff that we as a company are interested in and working on and advising people on. So that's where that future is.
Completely agree.
I will have to go in a bit, so I don't.
Yeah,
I hate.
We went way long.
Thank you. I think it looks like our speakers answered all questions. Yeah. When we summarize your speech, it's clear that if the footwear companies wants to be successful in sustainability, I think they should change their manufacturing perspective from starting from the design to package,
Yeah, the whole thing.
selecting the materials and manufacturing techniques also. Thank you, Nicolin.
Thank you.
Andy.
Thank you guys very much.
Yeah, I hope see you
Hope
soon
to meet
again.
in person next year.
Yeah, 100%.
Next event.
Okay. Okay, guys.
Thank you very much.